What's up, everybody? This is the Music Production Podcast, and I'm your host, Brian Funk. I make music as Afro DJ Mac, and today you're going to hear a conversation with Francis Preve. Francis Preve is a synthesist, sound designer, educator, journalist, musician. He's really one of the top guys in this field. If you are a sound designer, Francis Preve is likely an inspiration to you because his work is so incredible. Before we jump right into the conversation, though, I want to talk to you real quick about a special offer he's giving listeners to this podcast. So he's got a site called SympleSound. That's simple spelt with a Y, sound. So SYMPLESOUND.com. So SympleSound is where he makes his Ableton Live Packs, and these packs are of the highest quality. He's trying to really capture the essence of some classic analog synthesizers, and he does an amazing job. And there's even some really cool FM synthesis stuff too that I think is just incredible and you really need to check out. But he's offering 25% off your entire purchase of anything you want during the month of November 2017. And all you have to do is enter the code AfroDJMac2017. So head over to SympleSound.com, check out what he's got, load up your cart, and then pop in the code AfroDJMac2017 and you'll save 25%. And now, here is my conversation with Francis Preve. Hello and welcome to the Music Production Podcast. This is Brian Funk, your host, and I'm very excited to be here today with Francis Preve, who we could call a sound designer, a journalist, a college professor, somebody you want to know in the music industry. And he's full of lots of great knowledge and stories, and I'm very excited to talk to him. So I'm not going to waste any more time. Let's jump right in and say, hello, Francis, how you doing?
Hey, Brian, what's up?
Our second hello of the day is always the funny one. But it's great to talk to you. We've, kind of bounced off each other a bit in the past and had some little collaborations here and there. So it's really nice to bring it together in a little conversation. Thank you for taking the time.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for being one of the better resources for production and technical information on the interwebs. Because of my work with the students, they quote unquote try to turn me on to check out this YouTube channel and check out this blog, and yours is one of the few that I'm like, yeah, no, you should actually check out this one. So and I refer a lot of people to your stuff so this is great.
Well, I'm going to be walking around with a smile on my face for the rest of the day coming from you to hear that. So thank you. Very cool. So I think I want to maybe just bring up I'm into sound design, as you know. It's one of my favorite things, and I'm so excited about your Scapes project. Well, I think that's just been such a cool thing you're doing, where you're not just doing sound design to create those like harsh wobble basses or those kinds of things. Like you're really, for me personally, it's taking it to to the next level. My understanding of what you could even do with synthesizers is really enhanced by that.
And what I'd like to say, I want to interject here that you were the first person to really get what I was doing with it. And you did that amazing YouTube video, and I know this is all, mutual admiration society stuff, but at the same time, it's like when you put something out there that's as esoteric as Scapes, you wonder who if anyone, people, is gonna go, wow, this is kind of neat. And you ended up doing a big piece on it, which meant a lot to me personally as an artist when you did it. So there you go. So thank you.
Yeah, cool. Well, that was a fun one. So that Scapes project was the haunting, in which you created like the Halloween haunted house kind of soundscape. I don't know if I can call it music, but it was almost like what would you call it, like Foley for a movie in a way?
Well, first off, I don't know if anybody's ever seen the movie The Haunting, but if you ever, it's considered by pretty much every major director synth or suspense. Sorry, I'm talking about synths already. Suspense or thriller, or even Stephen King has referenced the movie. The movie, the Haunting from 1963 with Julie Harris, is arguably one of the most suspenseful movies, and there isn't a single act of violence in it, nor is there a single special effect, like visual effect in that movie. It's all done with camera angles and sound. And that movie had a huge impact on me when I saw it as a kid. And I still, secret nerdy Asperger's trait of Francis is I watch it every Halloween period. Like as soon as October rolls around, I will rewatch the movie, which means I've probably seen it like 15 times. Nice. So I was super inspired to do something that had the same ability that movie does to create an atmosphere just using sound. So.
Yeah, because I mean, even like some of the aspects is the grandfather clock. There's kind of like these ghosts, kind of like oh, and they sound so vocal, but they're just the operator in Ableton Live, and even just the mechanism of the alarm, the grandfather clock, really cool stuff. Like you don't think of that, I guess, and I spent a lot of time just kind of dissecting those patches that you had in there. Just trying to figure out like, wow, how does this work? And it's one of my like great fascinations with music, especially I guess with sampling, where you kind of never know what you're going to get and you start playing around with things. And this is just a great way of like where you took kind of those building blocks, simple waveforms that you get in FM synthesis, and all of a sudden now I'm in a haunted house. It just takes you right there.
It comes from listening really closely to everything that you're hearing. Like even like when I'm walking down the street, I'm listening to what I'm, everything I'm hearing, whether it's a bird or a car going by. Because I'm such a nerd about synthesizers, my brain, it used to be with music, and I listened to, anything from, house music to new wave to whatever. I grew up going, I wonder how that sound was made. And then once I started getting synths, I was like, I'm going to make those sounds. And I reached a point, and I mentioned this in some of the descriptions of the scapes on my website. I just reached a point where it's like, all right, I got it. Ooh, let's try to start listening to nature and see how those sounds are made. And when you hear a bird or a car or whatever, I start to deconstruct it in my head. And that's you have to have a theme when you're doing something. So that, a very concrete theme. You can't just have, here's a bird, here's a tiger, here's I wanted it to have some sort of contextual basis. So for the Haunting, it was like a haunted house, and I figured everybody could relate to a haunted house. So I put it around Halloween, and just as a neat way to sort of put it out there and see if anybody would copy it. I really wanted somebody to copy it. It's sort of, it's like, to use the bird metaphor, it's like that was my bird call to, is there anybody out there who wants to do this with me, and it was silent except for you. You picked up on it. And then I sort of waited for a few years before I did the other scapes, because I wanted to get those right. And every time I would listen to them, I'd be like, they weren't good enough they weren't up to my standards. So I waited a long time, but at the same time, I was like, is anybody going to pick up on this? Is anybody going to start doing this? And nobody did. So I was like, all right, now's my time. I'm going to do it. I'm going to put it out in August. So.
I got to imagine it's tricky to do because it's sort of needs to be completed to come together. I guess I would love to know like what sounds you worked on first, because I think it's more like once they come together, then you've got that experience like you're in the haunted house. But if you take like just say the footsteps or something, maybe those can be heard in a different way, but when you put it in that context, all of a sudden it comes to life.
I think I build it in a way that's similar to a painting or a movie shot or a photograph. I look at the space it's going to be in. So there's one that's called Summer Brook. And I was like, all right, well, if I'm going to be doing a escape around the concept of a summer brook, I'll start with the brook. With the haunted house, I was like, well, this is going to be taking place during a thunderstorm, so I need to have that. So I start with the weather effects for that. And then for the Rainy City Walk, I was like, I really wanted to get rain. And rain is one of those things that's, if you go open that project file, you'll find that there are like 8 tracks of rain, because to get all of the different components of what rain sounds like, you've got to get the individual drops. You have to have the sort of the sheets of rain. I mean, the sound of rain in a city, you're hearing both the individual drops that are in your acoustic proximity, but right. You're also hearing the rain absolutely everywhere, which becomes this not a reverby wash and not just a white noise. You can't just throw white noise in there and have it do its thing, because you've got to play with the filters. You have to have sort of rains. Well, but back to your original question, it's really about figuring out the space that whatever your scape is going to be located in, and creating that first. And then from there, it's picking the characters in the play. So if you think about it, you're creating the set for the play, and then you're picking what characters you want to be in that set, and then you're figuring out how to, what are they going to do? So now you've got a play, a stage set, and you've got some characters on it. Well, what are those characters going to do? In the case of birds, are they going to be cheeping? Are they going to be calling to each other? Are they going to be moving across, like the crows in the Summer Brook move across the soundstage? And then, once you have that in place, which is why these things take for me to get them to my standards, they take like a year, because it's not something you can listen to all the time. Like, at least with a song, you can be like, oh, that note in the bass line's wrong.
Yeah. Right.
But with Escape, if you're listening to it, I really do have to work on it really hardcore for a weekend and then take a month off. Work on it really hardcore for a weekend, take a month off. Because as I learn more about sound design and I learn more about listening, it's really all about listening. Then when I'm doing that, I come back. I always come back to it with fresh ears, and then it takes about a year to get it right. And then the last part of it is really getting the sort of acoustics right. There's a lot of the reason the grandfather clock works is because I had to apply EQ and filtering to place it within an acoustic space, and then decide where it is in the stereo field and all that. So that all of that really, really minutia kind of work. That's the final pass. But again, to summarize, it's you got to create your set for your play, and you got to figure out what characters are in your play, and then you have to figure out what those characters are doing.
I like that. So you sort of set the big picture. You start at the biggest, widest place, and then sort of start just placing things within that environment.
Yeah, with the summer night one, it's like I was literally on my back porch, and it was a hot summer night, and in Texas there were bugs galore. So it was like, oh, crickets, and oh, cicadas, and oh, what's that bug over there? And I realized that the bugs themselves created this din of constant noise. And then listening closer to that din, I would hear, well, each of those, like if you listen to a cricket, everybody can imagine a cricket. I know that all of our listeners right now can imagine a cricket. And a cricket is doing a rhythm. It's going cheep, 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 pause, pause, pause,
I think it has something to do with the
cheap.
temperature, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it does actually. Yeah. I don't know. I don't have Wikipedia in front of me, but you are 100% correct that the rate. I don't know about the pitch, but I know that the rate of that correlates with the temperature. Who knows? Maybe the humidity as well. But yeah, I realized that for the summer one, I realized that the bugs were going to be the basis. Yeah. And then I was like, but then I hear, then I'd hear a frog every once in a while. And I was like, all right, got to put a frog in there, but once in a while.
Yeah.
So that kind of thing.
Huh. A mysterious creature in the background.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nice. I think it's a part of the reason I ask, and I wish I could remember where I've seen this, and someone's gonna tell me it's something so obvious, but seeing something about rain, and actually like the sound of rain. If you put a rainy storm on the screen, it looks like rain, it sounds like rain. But if you put a frying pan with bacon, it sounds like a frying pan, cooking bacon, because of the context that you see, the visual connection you make.
That is absolutely true, and I think I know what you're referencing, but I can't point to a URL. but I did see that interview or that story, and that's I think, I mean, like, while we're talking about bacon, I want to do like a totally nerdy aside. The synth that can do bacon frying perfectly is the SH-101. And I discovered this when I got my SH-101 as a kid. And the SH-101, if you use the noise waveform to modulate the filter cutoff with the resonance at maximum, and you bring up the filter cutoff, which removes the low end in relationship to the resonance, the combination of the noise modulation on the filter cutoff with the resonance at max. So I would imagine you could totally do this with the new Roland boutique and Era stuff. But the SH-101 does the best bacon frying, hands down, of any synth.
I wonder if that was an intentional feature.
No, I'm pretty sure.
Send it back. The bacon's off.
But for all any Foley guys who are out there listening, if you wanna, I mean, granted, it's fun to make bacon and eat it later. But if you're in a hurry with a hard deadline on that demanding director, get your SH-101 and get that hysterical bacon happening.
Yeah, I love it. So like you're placing these characters in there, and something I always like to do with my music, kind of coincidentally, I guess, is I'll often add like a nature sound in there or some sort of ambient noise to kind of give it that atmosphere. Because I think when you're working digitally and in your DAWs and everything's so sterile, and if like there's not a track playing, it's pure nothing silence. I think it really kind of gives your track this like life, and like it's actually happening somewhere, even if it's just a microphone in the room recording nothing.
You are 100% correct.
I miss that on like from my tape machines, and where you get the hiss, where it kind of feels like a place.
I noticed that also when I went on a long camping trip. Actually, one of the pictures from the Scape series. I went on a camping trip in Colorado that was mostly a camping trip and partly a research project. And I was in the middle of the Rockies, and it was a quiet day. It was nowhere near a road. I was 10,000 feet up on one of the passes, and I just listened. And I realized that like reality itself has a noise floor.
Yeah.
So that's a super insightful. Adding a natural thing, even if it's super low in the mix. A concrete example of this is my track, Yin. What we put into that when we were first starting out is we found a crowd sound. And there's literally a crowd running through that entire track that's sort of rising and falling in volume.
Nice. just to kind of be there to give it a place. Yeah.
Just for the same reason that you were talking about. I have a theory that I've never really seen anybody else mention, but except for you just now, that the ear, because in nature we gravitate, we're constantly exposed to natural sounds simply by the virtue of having ears. Mm-hmm. A lot of electronic music is missing the complexity of acoustic and organic sounds. And samples are cool for that. And when I say samples, I mean like triggered samples are cool for that. But the brain immediately picks up on the gimmick and goes, oh yeah, no, that's that sound again. That's that sound again.
Yeah.
But in the case of adding any sort of like a organic chaos, or if you're using a Lorenz modulator, which is the most random, from what I understand, and I could be mistaken, but certainly at some point in time in the past decade, a Lorenz modulator can create this sort of chaos that's even more chaotic than quote unquote a sample and hold generator. And anytime you can add something that is just subtly changing, that's why people like analog. I like real analog because the cycle isn't always the same. Every time you hit a note, if it's a proper analog synth, you're picking it up at a different point of phase in the oscillator. The oscillators are always running. It's the keys that aren't gating them. Right. So anytime you can add this kind of, whether it's conscious or subliminal, randomness or chaos to a sound, it's going to make that particular sound or that particular track, first off, bear for repeated listenings longer. But more importantly, the ear, whether you're conscious of it or not, is going to gravitate towards those sounds.
Yeah, when you put it that way, the randomness, I think of all these like little tricks I like to do myself to kind of fight the perfection of the computer and to kind of get away from just like making my loops sound less like loops.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just like one of my favorite devices in live is the frequency shifter, just put on like a real subtle, slow movement where it's just kind of warping your track very subtly, and sometimes I'll even put like a Max for Live, the LFO, and connect it so that the rate is randomized a little bit, or the depth is randomized a little bit. And sometimes when I take it off, I don't even hear it. But sometimes I feel like once it goes on, I'm like, now this has like a life. This sound is coming together.
That is a brilliant idea, which I am promptly stealing. Thank you very much.
Please do.
That's a really, really good idea, Brian. Thank you.
It's the basis of I've made like a VHS rack, and I do this to the extreme, but it's actually like I think 3 of them lined up, 3 of the frequency shifters, and they're just all kind of, you can just play around with the rates and
parallel
stuff.
Or series?
That is, I believe that's in series. I've experimented with parallel on different like frequency bands, and sometimes that's kind of fun too.
You might get phase stuff that way.
Yeah,
though,
yeah. There's a price you pay. Definitely a price you pay.
That's a really good idea to use a frequency shifter with like 0.10 or 0.01 hertz modulation, so that it's really just making everything ever so slightly different. That's a really, really, really sick trick.
Just like trying to. I talk about this a lot with my students, but I'm always like at this funny point where I remember having my 4-track tape recorder, as a kid, and recording things and dreaming of like infinite tracks and clean recordings. Because, once you do your 3 tracks and you bounce them to the 4th, like you've just like killed your fidelity. And of course, you're an adventurous person, so you want like 12 tracks. So you do that a handful of times. But now I find myself going back where I'm like, I wish my instruments were not perfectly in tune and not perfectly in time, and things had little errors and mistakes in them.
Well, tuning's a really, really interesting. Okay, so let me riff on that for a second.
Please.
Tuning is a big part of what listeners associate as the difference between analog and digital.
Mm-hmm.
And a really specific example of that is when you're working with a vintage or modern even voltage controlled synth that's using the 1 volt per octave specification. The second octave, if it's like the first octave is 1 volt and the second one is 2 volts, that's not 2 volts. That might be 2.001 volts, or that might be 1.998 volts, but it is not exactly 2 volts. And because of that, there's always this kind of stretch tuning going on within a traditional classic monophonic analog synth. Mm-hmm. It's an interesting feature in Reason's Thor, where you can dial the keyboard tracking in for the oscillators. Mm-hmm. And when you do that on the oscillators and you dial that keyboard tracking in just a smidge so that it's not exactly 100%, it instantly sounds like quote unquote real analog.
Yeah.
The other thing, I did a tutorial in Electronic Musician recently, on how to make things sound more analog via that sort of chaos. And that's just a really good point, that like if you're trying to get a more organic or analog sound, leave it out of tune. Don't have it dramatic, don't play in a different key, but don't be slavishly devoted to deviations of less than 5 cents in either direction, because it will add that. If you've got a band, if you are a guitarist and a drummer and a bassist and you're all playing together, after the third songs your instruments are slightly out of tune.
Right.
They're great when you first tune it up, but then after you play for a little while, just because of the nature of physical properties, they get to be slightly out of tune. That's why the whole 432 hertz thing just realize that's a different rant for a different day. And if you want to see the best rant ever, go to Adam Neely's YouTube channel. He has the rant on 432.
Who is that?
Adam Neely. He's my YouTube spirit animal. He's cool. He definitely the information he gives you in a really clean, entertaining way about both music theory and sound and that sort of thing. I mean, I will binge his channel for hours at a time.
Nice.
Really, really good
familiar.
stuff.
I got to check it out.
Yeah. Adam Neely, Neely. Okay. He's a beast.
It's some of those things, first of all, like 440, what for me is something I never really thought about until I started playing with synthesizers and electronic music. Because I came up as a guitarist, and when I'm tuning my guitar with like my pedal or my little tuner, that note is never just like right in the middle on the green dot where it's supposed to be. No. It's always like kind of dancing around, and like for me it was always, I need to just get this thing to kind of dance a little bit around it on each side, and then I know I'm like relatively in tune enough.
Right.
So
right. And that's why
when I hear the 8 hertz, I'm kind of like, I just know that my guitar was never that precise.
No. That's why people they're and with regards to, a lot of people are like, electronic music is so clinical and I like bands better. I have to ask myself how much of that may in fact be, I just like my stuff to be a little out of tune, everybody.
Yeah.
So,
well, it's something I noticed when I, coming with electronic music as a new thing for me, doing like rock band, singer-songwriter type songs, I would throw on some synths, and my first synths were all virtual synths, plugins and stuff.
Right.
And it was like they just never sat right. And it bugged me. I couldn't understand why I couldn't get a nice mix with these sounds. And it started to occur to me that like these things are so in tune, so perfect that it makes my guitars sound weird, or vice versa. Something goes wrong.
Exactly.
And then it became like the challenge, like, all right, well, how can I ruin that? Just enough to make it like work together. I find it hard to like sing over any tracks that I do inside the box. I'm not one to sing perfectly in tune, but if I'm playing my guitar, it just sounds better. And I think it's that kind of, everything's like, I like to think of it like we're relatively in tune.
Well, with regard to vocals, I will someday I will let the world know that I also can sing, because I have never sung on a single track that I've ever put out, at least. As I got older and started giving fewer beeps, I realized that my favorite singers were always wildly out of tune. Like, first off, auto-tune is a 21st century innovation. That word was definitely in air quotes. And I think the artists that Aretha Franklin's got an incredible voice, and she's got incredible tuning. She can hit those notes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not knocking Aretha Franklin, so no trolls, please. But what I am saying is those grace notes and the notes that she uses to get to the other notes, those are not auto-tuned. Those are part of the performance. Morrissey from the Smiths. Oh my God, I don't know if he's ever been in tune, but he's Morrissey from the Smiths. And New Order, for people who are also into that kind of new wave. Bernard Sumner, no. And those are the things that we love about their voices.
Yeah.
None of the things I just said were critiques in any way. Those are the things that really, really make those vocalists so human, and as a result, really, you can have a more empathic connection with both the words and the artist because of the fact that they feel real. They feel like a human being.
Yeah, I agree. The empathy, the emotion comes through. A lot of the like feeling and the hurt are in those like those kind of like slide down to the note, or like reaching, bending the note up. Yeah, one of my favorite vocalists is Neil Young, and I would never want to hear him auto-tuned.
Oh, no. Neither would he. Neither would he.
He would never allow that.
But yet, except for the Trans record, if you are a Neil Young fan, go listen to the Trans record sometime. There are vocoders all over that. But I'm a huge Neil Young fan too. Heart of Gold, Heart of Gold. There's amazing vocal performance, and definitely not auto-tuned in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
So
it's such a tricky thing, and I think especially for me, with any students who are trying to get their tracks to sound professional, whatever that even means anymore, I can't tell you. I'm losing touch with that. But when you're trying to get things to sound clean and smooth, and maybe just not amateur is a better way to put it, but it's a really hard call, that like, because it's very easy to cross that line where it just has no feeling. It's just clinical, and everything gets lost.
Well, getting back to the vocals, getting back to the way we talked about even your frequency shifters. I think, I don't know how it's captured. Certainly not in a digital format, but I think there's a certain kind of confidence that comes from leaving the imperfections in, and people people are attracted to confidence. And for you to say, yeah, I meant to do that. Let's leave it that way.
Right.
Even if it's not a perfect performance, it's like, no, that communicated what I wanted to do. Let's move on to the next track. And that takes a certain kind of confidence where you're not constantly applying foundation and eyeliner and all of, doing all of these things to conceal the natural beauty of the performance.
Yeah. Well, I've always had a hard time re-recording songs. Like if I demo a song, say, it's like really hard to capture that energy of the early takes and the emotion. And I think it's a lot of times because you're cleaning it up. You're trying to, do it better, cleaner. And I think that takes you out of the feeling part, the more like visceral, emotional end of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And related to that, the other thing I urge my students to do in some of my classes when they're making music, when they're working on a sound design project, I do sort of want them to be perfectionistic. But when they're working on a musical project, I tell them to work quickly, and leave, other than quantization, because quantization is kind of important. But in terms of getting the ideas out, work as quickly as possible. Another example of that is if you've got 10 weeks to make one great song, instead of going with the idea you like and then plowing through it for 10 weeks, make 10 songs in 1 week and then pick the best one.
I like that. I like that a lot because I think we start obsessing and we overcook it. We start making decisions just because you can make them. Well, I need a compressor on this track, or whatever it might be.
Right.
And you lose that like artistic adventurism, for lack of a better word. But
your audience is humans, so relate to them. Be human when you're relating to them.
Yeah, I find myself giving the advice not to be afraid. And I do this with English students. I do it with the music students. But make a bad song. Write a bad piece of writing. Just do it. Take yourself through the process, and then analyze what you have and figure out what you need to do. But sometimes that like reaching for perfection thing is paralyzing.
Yeah. I mean, and it applies across the board pretty much to almost any aspect of life with dating. It's like the people who put on, you go on a first date and you conceal your entire personality because you want the other person to like them. And then they start dating you. And 3 months later, they're like, who's this person? You're not the person from the first date.
Yeah.
So, if that's whenever, I'm giving personal advice, I'm always like, be yourself to a fault, because they're going to have to deal with it sooner or later.
Yeah.
And you should at least give them an opportunity to decide for themselves whether or not they like the you that you usually are.
Yeah. And then you're probably even lucky if you get to that third month, because you don't come off as genuine.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then you can find somebody else who's faking it.
Yeah.
I am a little cynical.
That is okay. I think it's okay. Be yourself to a fault, as you said. Oh boy. So I have a whole list of things to talk to you about, and I feel like we're gonna spend a lot of time going deep, which is cool with me. And I know we did talk a little bit about the teaching stuff early. I did kind of want to cycle back to that a little bit.
Sure.
And we were talking a bit about like connecting with the students and reaching them, and especially I guess as we get further and further in our careers, and I've noticed myself starting to feel generational gaps growing a little bit, and the difference. How do you deal with that? How do you stay connected when sometimes maybe the world is moving away? I think it's maybe fair to say if we're talking a lot about imperfections here, and it seems like everything's getting more and more cleaned up, your filters on your phone, and your photographs don't even look like you anymore. How do you maintain that connection? This is a selfish question for me.
I become Neil Young.
Help me.
I treat all of my classes as a conversation, and not a lecture. In terms of editing, I edit myself only in terms of language, which is more necessary to keep your job these days. So I edit that way. But when it comes to my teaching style, I really do treat all of my students as if they were people I was just meeting. And my job is to convey the information that they signed up for from the perspective of my 20 plus years in this industry. So there's a little weight there. But not to edit myself to the point where I'm the boring lecturing guy. And I also understand that these classes are creative classes. So for instance, I have a remixing class, and I teach that one semester a year. And for the remixes, when the class first started, it was dance. The only thing people were using Ableton Live for. The class is live based, obviously. The only thing people were using Live for was electronic music. Yeah. Despite the fact that it could record anything. So I've had over the years, it happens usually there's one per semester where the student's like, I play guitar. And I'm like, Live records guitar. I want you to, the remixes, it's like, we should change the name of the class to recontextualization.
I like that.
Where I give all of the students the same a cappella for a track that is recognizable and melodic, and at one point in time popular as a pop song. So there's some sort of connection to the zeitgeist. But then I say, make a piece of music around that. And the criteria for myself as a teacher is it warped properly? i.e., is it synchronized properly? Are the notes that you are playing in conjunction with it in tune? And did you at least spend a little time mixing it?
Yeah.
And that's sort of for the first project. But I don't tell them how to be creative. And I don't talk down to them unless they talk down to me. When they talk down to me, then there's like, we have a problem. So it's a conversation. It's like I'm not trying to be their friend, but I'm trying to make it a dialogue rather than a monologue. So that's how I address it. I'm myself with that. And there are some students, I've had many students over the years who have gone on to some really interesting things. And there are some students that really shine brightly, and I can't help but spend a smidge more time on them because their hands are going up more than the other students. They're the ones asking the questions and calling me over to listen to their projects. I'm not playing favorites. I'm available to everybody, but you've got to take a step towards me for me to take a step towards you. But in terms of the sort of the more standard democratic process of it, is I have a course outline, a syllabus, and I adhere to the topics for each class. But the students are going to get as much out of it as they're willing to raise their hand and ask questions.
That's nice. And something I deal with maybe as like an English teacher is that we have the same books we do every year. And as classic as some of them are, I don't know too many books I want to read every single year, 5 times a year, for 5 different classes. So it's hard sometimes to not be burnt out by that. But when you take the process or the approach, I guess, of here are the topics, and then you kind of allow them to explore it through the dialogue, take it in the direction that they're kind of interested in. That must keep it fresh for you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a really interesting point, because my midterm project is always Tom's Diner.
Mm.
I don't know if you remember that from DNA, Suzanne Vega.
Yeah.
Yeah. So because it's only 4 notes, I know it's kind of hard to screw up. So I give that as the midterm project so that people have an a cappella that really, you have to work to mess it up. But because all 10 students in any given semester are working on the same a cappella, I'm always interested because I get to hear their voices as artists. And because we all we have to present our projects to the class as a whole, they get to hear how every other student approached it. And I had one student this past semester who was having a lot of trouble because she had anticipated wrongly that I would only be wanting dance music, and it is called a remixing class. So I had to clarify that. But I told she was working on a project and it wasn't coming together. And I was like, well, what is this the kind of music that do you listen to house music at home? She was like, no, I listen to more chill outy, kind of things and really, kind of pop and singer-songwritery stuff. And I was like, that's your remix. That's what you should be shooting for, because that's you as an artist.
I think you've kind of touched on something I never really thought about, but it's maybe just kind of words really, but remix, that word, I think has almost become a genre in a way. It's a style of doing things. I think dance music, I think it might, if it's a remix of like I don't know, an old Bob Dylan song, I'm picturing it on a dance floor. But the idea to call it recontextualize, I think is great. It for me, at least, it takes it out of that like kind of world where we're taking this song and putting it in the dance floor world, and it's now just we're making something new, which I think is probably what it originally meant.
It originally meant like, let's make it long for the dance floor,
for the DJ,
for the DJ at Studio 54. So there would be like tape edits, and it was a completely different, much more mechanical process. Nowadays, I think it has more elements of collage than as let's make this a dance track. It's like we are taking found objects and we are putting them in, showing them under a new light. And that light ideally should be the beautiful light that shines through you as an artist. It should be your voice, that light where you take like in the case of, there's some really, if you look at like I'm a big fan of 20th century abstract expressionism, and several of the artists would work with found objects, in their sculptures, or even pasting them onto their paintings. Andy Warhol, if you want to go there, taking Campbell's soup cans and repeating them is a remix.
Yeah, right.
So it's really just drawing from existing artworks and using them as an instrument for you to express yourself. So,
well, I think that concept of remix kept me from dropping the needle on a vinyl and just sampling it and making something new with it. But once I finally started getting adventurous like that, I was taking, maybe it was just like parts of a little loop that I'd chop the chords up or something, and then just making another song in my style of making songs was a lot nicer for me than like trying to make like, the dance floor thing that, wasn't really the kind of music I was making anyway.
Right. It's simply an artistic process or a technique. Production technique.
Sometimes I think maybe the vocabulary and the techniques get lost. Like you said, like Ableton Live is for electronic music. I hear that all the time, but there's nothing that, there's no reason to really think that. You can do whatever you want with it. But when people hear that, they just assume, they make the connection.
Well, the other thing is that Ableton Live for the first 3 versions was audio only. They didn't add MIDI until version 4. So, I mean, so it was always a little surprising to me that, and there are definitely artists out there. There are a lot of Ableton artists out there that I really respect who are using it to record their guitars or their basses or live instruments, because it does that really, really well. But I think that actually brings up a really good point when you're talking about recontextualizing and slicing up your stuff. Ableton just does that. That's just the way you work in Ableton. If you're starting in the scenes window, when that's why I always my students get so mad at me. I force them to work in the scenes window instead of the timeline window, because a lot of them are, they're coming from other platforms like Logic or Cubase or whatever, and I'm like, no. We are doing this in the scenes window, and you will understand why when we're done with the project.
Yeah, it took me a while to figure that out, but it changed the way I think about music, where, I always felt like I'd come up with my little parts and sections, but I always had the trouble tying them together. That's where I felt weakest anyway. And the ability to just sort of jam on it, just play and let it kind of unfold on its own took me to just another world.
Well, isn't that the way people wrote prior to digital technology?
Yeah, I would think
that's
so.
The way a band would get get in a room, and they'd bang it out until something came together, and that's the scenes window.
Yeah, and I guess it's that kind of what is it? What am I saying? Like the kind of standard way of working you get when you start recording, and a lot of my writing happens as I'm recording. So you're thinking left to right, start to finish, and that's very difficult to do when you don't even have your ideas straight yet.
Right. I think because I've always worked with sequencers, I used to actually have some respectable piano playing skills, but I joked that by 1987 my left hand was strictly for buttons. But back to what you were saying is like when I grew up on the my first adult sequencing tool was the Lin 9000, and you would make a pattern, and then you'd make another pattern, and then you'd make another pattern, and you'd string them all together. So there was a way to I think by nature of the way I got into production and composition, I've always been thinking in terms of patterns, and scenes reinforces that. Yeah,
funny how that works, right? The way your old ways inform your new ways of doing things. I always get fascinated when you sort of shatter those, when you kind of have those breakthroughs. And I think that was, I guess for me, it was like kind of, like you said, it always started out just kind of banging it out with the band until you got it. And then it became like, all right, now I have to figure it out before I write it. And then it's like back to the beginning again.
Right. But you can jump around, when you're working with a band. So rather than belabor the scenes example, when you're working with a band, you're like, hey, which part should come next? Or, hey, we're coming out of the chorus and I can't figure out how to get back into the verse. And then somebody else in the band will come up with that idea. Yeah. Oh, well, just play these 3 chords and the drummer will slow down. When you're working in a collaborative environment, there's a lot of back and forth where people come up with ideas that you might not have. And what your process that you just described, by taking something that's already pre-existing and then chopping it and slicing it, et cetera, forces you into a new perspective on what you already did.
Right. I didn't even think of that. But it's true. Yeah, it's like when you take a vacation and then you come back home and the old streets look a little different.
Oh, yes, indeedy.
So I know you got a lot of fun stuff going on and big things coming up, and you can speak of what you want. But I'm always, as you know, a fan of your sound design work. And I found it kind of funny to myself when I was playing around with like some of my favorite apps on the iPad, like the Gadget or the Monopoly, and I'm like, these synths sound great, and they came with some great sounds, and then lo and behold, who's behind it? It's you.
I've been working with a lot of people this year.
What are some of your favorite projects you've done, or some of the ones that you're most excited about?
I'm excited about all of them. I don't take a project unless I'm going to be excited about it. I turn down projects, believe it or not. I obviously I'm not gonna tell you who I turned down, but if I'm not into the synth or the piece of software, I'm like, I can put my time elsewhere.
Now it's work.
But when something comes in where I'm like, oh, that's really cool, and I am, to use the correct word, inspired by the synth or the app, then it's not work at all. It's just me figuring out a new synth. I think everything Korg is doing for iOS is just absolutely A-list. I think there are a lot of companies out there, and I'm sorry I'm not mentioning them all. But the Korg stuff, my best friend had up a Monopoly, and I always wanted it. So interestingly enough, when Korg released the original Monopoly Legacy Edition VST, they had asked me if I would do that. I started working with them because my first synth was a Poly 6, and they released the VST for the Poly 6, and I ran into them at a conference. I think it was AES or another conference, and I was like, oh my God, the Poly 6 is my first synth. Do you have patch number 32 Cave Echo? And they were like, no, those patches were all lost. And I'm like, oh, it's this. And I just like I admit I was showing off because I wanted to get a gig out of them. So I like recreated Cave Echo on the fly because it's a resonant, a self-oscillating resonant filter with a long release, keyboard tracking perfectly so that it's all in tune. And then the cool Poly 6 ensemble, watery ensemble that's super thick. And together it makes this ultra ambient sine wave sound. So I did that, and they were like, "Hey, do you want to do some stuff for the Poly 6?" And I said, "Sure." And then when the Monopoly came out as a plug-in VST, they were like, "Hey, we liked your Poly 6 stuff. Do you want to do that?" And I was like, "Sure." And then when the iOS came about, it was a different group of people because 10 years had elapsed. And they were like, "Hey, do you want to do the Monopoly?" And I was like, "Again?" So I did a bunch of stuff for the Monopoly, which is just a joy to program because of the way it does the paraphonic stuff. And then for Gadget, I'm a Gadget user. I mean, when I travel with my iPad, not my laptop. And when I feel even if I had my laptop with me, I would not be completing tracks. I would be doodling. Mm-hmm. So, but the neat thing about Gadget is it exports to live as stems. It will export a live project with audio files in it. So if I do come across something that I'm like, oh yeah, this is really cool, I think I might want to work on it some more, I can export it to live. But the synths in Gadget are great because they're all super specialized, and they only have the parameters that are unique to that kind of sound, and they get rid of all of the distracting parameters so that the walls are padded, and you really can't make a bad sound with any of those synths, even though they have a ton of parameters that you can make great sounds with. So they asked me to do Gadget this year, a bunch of new. If you're a Gadget user and you go to the Factory 2 bank on a bunch of those synths, those are my contributions this year.
Cool.
I did Beat Tools, that pack that came out earlier this year for Ableton.
The great pack.
Yeah, thank you. I wasn't the only guy, but thank you for whatever you liked of mine.
I think that was Houston Singletary, right?
He was single. Dude, that guy is a beast too, and he's my project manager on that. And then the Rev 2 for Dave Smith, because I use a lot of his products in my own studio. And he's been a supporter of my work even back when I was doing the label stuff. And we always sort of, we're very friendly with each other. And at NAMM we do shots. This year at NAMM, I was in his booth and I said, you're kind of the only company I haven't worked for that I still want to. and he was like, you want to work on the Rev 2? And I was like, yeah, I want to work on the Rev 2. So they sent me the Rev 2 and I did a bunch of presets for that. Every year I release my Serum Toolkit pack because Steve's a friend of mine and I've been working with Serum since before it came out. So that's an opportunity for me to sort of express myself sonically, creatively. Mm-hmm. And I'm actually brainstorming on Serum Toolkit 3 because I always try to make the toolkits really versatile regardless of the genre you're working on. So even if you're doing, hard style, you're still going to need some cool melodic percussion kinds of effects. So I try to make my stuff for the Serum packs, and any pack, actually, any project that I do, I should clarify. I always try to go for the stuff that's timeless and useful regardless of what the end context is.
I think that's a cool aspect of a lot of your work. Sometimes you'll play an instrument at this music store, or you first open your plugin and you like press one note and like all the bells and whistles go off, every effect, and it's a whole track, one key.
Right.
And it sounds great, and maybe it might make you buy it, I don't know, but it's never really working in your actual music.
Correct. I'll throw a few show-off patches like that in just because I need to throw a couple. I need a couple of those
product a little.
Yeah, sell the product. So I'll throw a couple of those in, and those are fun because I get to stretch in different directions. But I think if I had to sort of summarize it, if you play one of my patches and you know exactly what genre it's for, then I have failed. Because I want the sounds to be not generic. My sounds are anything but generic, but I want them to have a longer shelf life than just, oh my God, this dance music style is popular right now. We must have all. Yeah, there are guys out there who can crush it doing that. They listen to they just stay on top of Beatport and they nail the sounds from the hits of today. Mm-hmm. But that's, and there's a huge market. There's actually a bigger market for that. But I gotta be able to fall asleep at night. So I do that.
Yeah, that's good. That's, you've kind of following your own desire too. And to make something like that won't just kind of be like, so that was so 2016.
Oh yeah.
The way electronic music goes, that was so March 2016.
Yeah, exactly.
By the time it comes out, it's already, cliche.
Well, and I think that's a really good point that you bring up is if when you do that, because of the date stamp factor, it's really good for those 6 months that genre is popular. And then it's a bit like mom jeans, or jorts. It's like I remember I had a pair of jorts. We all had a pair of jorts back in the jorts days. But now I don't want to play. I don't ever want to make the patch that people go, oh yeah, that's totally a jorts patch.
Yeah. That's funny. Yeah, they get stuck in that time. I guess if you're lucky, 20 years later, you come back into style.
That actually has
snare drum maybe.
That's happened in my production career. And what was really fun was it's like something will come back, and if I need to do a remix or on the rare occasions I still do dance music, I'll be like, oh yeah, I did that 20 years ago. I can do that in my sleep. Let's do it. Just because it's like, I've already learned how to do that. So it's kind of fun to stretch. But at the same time, that's another reason that I've sort of moved away from dance music as a composer and a musical artist, is simply because I love stuff that's fresh. Yeah. And so much of what's going on in dance music right now is super cyclical, and I want to hear the thing I haven't heard yet.
Yeah, makes me think of. I heard you speak about this on your podcast with Matt Lange.
Yeah, Matt Lang.
Matt Lang, sorry. And
it's okay.
He you guys talked a little bit about it here, and I think we might have done a little back and forth too on the tyranny of the kick drum. The kind of just metronome that's in every piece of music these days.
Yeah, and it's fine because it serves a very utilitarian purpose. That I'd had a few beers in me, so I kind of went off on it, maybe a little harder than I should have in that interview. I meant everything I said. I just didn't say it particularly elegantly.
It resonated with me a little bit, though, where it's like a kind of because again, coming from a different background, rock music, which you can say has its own like little cliches and tropes things, but that was something that always kind of struck me. It's like every song has the same kick drum pattern,
Right. And it's like it's the purpose it serves, the relentless 4 on the floor, is because people are just arrived. People either leaving the club, arriving in the club. They want they want to immediately dance.
Yeah.
But as a composer, it became, oh God, not this again. And I really wanted to work in different BPMs. I just did a huge project that unfortunately I'm still under NDA because I would love to talk about it right now. I just did a huge project of music library for a very recognizable company that's not in our industry. That's more of a global company. I did a library for them, and I think I can say all of that. And in doing so, they just said, we'll just make music. And I was like, you mean I can make anything I want? And I did. And I'd make one track and I'm like, I'm not going to make 10 of the same day. I needed 10 tracks. I'm not going to make 10 of the same tracks. I'm going to every time I'd make a track, I would be like, okay, check. I'm not going to make one of those next. Mm-hmm. And so I would do something that was, a little bit more sort of chill out, trip hop, Boards of Canada kind of thing. And then I'd turn around and I'd make something that was more like that indie chill taiko kind of thing. And then I'd do another one that was just like straight up retro 1984 Madonna track. And it was so liberating, and I was always stretching, and it was like I just literally felt like an animal that had been let out of its cage, in that I didn't have any genre expectations, and the tracks came out better because of that, because I wasn't like, oh gosh, I hope that this season's round of club goers really like this, and I hope it sounds enough like everybody else's track. And
yeah,
that's just no way to live. Mm-hmm. I mean, I guess it is, but it's not for me anymore.
Yeah, it's a way to live, I guess, to make the ends meet. But
right,
artistically, I hear what you're saying. Yeah. Well, that's cool. Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about, so I don't think you spoiled any secrets, but it sounds
no,
fun.
No,
yeah, and I look forward to whatever this may be, because those three types of music, Madonna, and then Boards of Canada, and so I forget what you said.
Taiko.
Oh, yeah.
And again, I want to be absolutely clear that I wasn't ripping them off. It's just sort of like, if you listen to a bunch of rock, you're going to make a rock track. If you listen to a bunch of trip hop, you're going to make a trip hop track. I'm just using those artists. I'm actually meticulous when I'm inspired by a specific genre, or I'm using that as a target. I am meticulous about making sure that I am nowhere near anybody else's chord progressions.
Yeah. Well, read an interview with Paul McCartney saying, I always have a song in my head when I'm writing a song, and I'm always kind of like using that as like my, I guess like beacon, lighthouse. I forget what he said exactly, but it was like, I'm not ripping the song off, but like I want a song that's kind of like that song.
It's funny you should mention Paul McCartney, because just literally this week on Spotify, I discovered a Wings track I had never heard before. It just came up on my Spotify radio. And I'm like, oh my God, this is the best track ever. I completely fell in love with it and turned into a 14-year-old girl playing it over and over and over again. And for anybody out there who wants to hear an awesome Paul McCartney track, go check out a track called Arrow Through Me. Arrow Through Me, and it's off of the last Wings album called Back to the Egg. And everything else on that record is completely not something you need to ever hear. But that one track, Arrow Through Me, I guarantee you his target for that track was Smooth Stevie Wonder. Oh, cool. And hearing Paul McCartney do it's in 5/4. It's got a brass line that every hip hopper should sample. It's an amazing track, start to finish, really sophisticated, brilliant chords, and it's all like clavinet and Fender Rhodes.
Nice. So, I can't tell you how many times that's happened to me through Paul McCartney or the Beatles, and that's a track I'm not familiar with, so I got to check it out. Yeah,
you'll like it. Send me an email and let me know what you think.
Cool. Thanks. I'm probably 25, 30 times in my life I've come across tracks like that. I'm like, what? This is the Beatles? This is John Lennon? Just they blow your mind so many times.
Those guys are the artists, I mean, and a big part of it is, cycling back to what we said earlier, it's a big part of them being true to themselves.
Right.
It's like, it's not like the Beatles weren't copying anybody on Sgt. Pepper's or Revolver or the White Album, because I don't believe I ever heard anything that sounded like Revolution Number 9 before Revolution Number 9. So go Beatles. Ditto Pink Floyd.
Yeah, that's the pinnacle for me right there.
So,
can I ask you about SympleSound?
Yeah,
Simple
sure.
with a Y.
Yeah, we're going long, but it's okay. If anybody out there who's still listening to this podcast, thanks for staying with us. I promise I'll say a few more things that are hopefully interesting.
I think you will. That's why I'm going with it.
Yeah, no, I'll keep going. This is fun. SympleSound. Oh gosh. SympleSound was something I'd always wanted to do. That is to say, I have a room full of really great analog synths, and I don't at the time. Now, actually, I've seen a couple of people copy SympleSound. Hi, everybody. But I hadn't heard anybody handle analog synths the right way. Or even FM, because I did an FM pack, where they might be like, oh yeah, these are all samples from the Oberheim Moby XA, but they weren't the definitive samples from those synths. They weren't like, because it's like there's an SH-101 sound that when you hear it, you're like, oh, that's the SH-101. And the SH-101 can make sounds that are a little bit more generic, but I wanted to really capture for each of the instruments that I created. I really wanted to capture the sounds that only the SH-101 could make, and that only the Prophet 08 could make, and only the Oberheim SEM could make, and playing with the state variable filters and the sync function. So I really wanted to dial into those synths' identities when I was doing it. So I did. So I really just did it kind of as I'm going to spend some time on it. I'm going to make something that I personally feel is a quality product as a journalist and a reviewer. I wanted to make something that I wouldn't poke holes in. I wanted to include, I think a lot of times people get sounds and they don't quite know how to use them. They're like, oh, I wonder what, because, a good sound could be used as a bass or a good sound or a pluck or a good sound is versatile. So I figured I'd put some loops in to inspire people, and release it as a project rather than an ALP. I've had a couple of people send me letters. Hey, why don't you release your stuff as an ALP? Because I don't want to. Dial tone, click, goodbye. All due respect, there are companies out there doing great ALPs, and ALPs are wonderful. And I'm not saying anything. I'm not like saying, oh, ALPs are terrible. I'm just saying that's not what I wanted to do as an artist, as a sound designer.
It does pigeonhole you a little bit.
What?
The ALP format.
Yeah, well, and it's fine. Again,
it's a good compression format.
Yeah, it's a good. No, it's. I'm not knocking ALPs. Yeah. I wanted. Okay, so I'm a big Apple fan, like Steve Jobs era Apple fan, to put it in a nuanced way. And the thing about an Apple product from that time period that made it so much, that made them so appealing, was that they were literally just fun out of the box. You turned it on and you were having fun.
Yeah.
So I put the loops in there so that people could immediately go, oh yeah, this is fun. I can play with this. And because I'm a college professor and a writer, I figured hey, that little pop-out panel with the instruction manuals, why don't I use that? So so they all include this pop-out panel that explains exactly what's going on. I will say my secret agenda there was also because I didn't want to do tech support. So I create everything you need when you buy one of the products. You'd open up the Ableton project. If you liked a sound, you just hit save. If you didn't like a sound, don't hit save. Don't fill up your library with crap you're not going to use. Mm-hmm. So I did, so I did that, and not everyone got it because there were people who wanted ALPs, but the people who did get it were really, really into it, and that's the highest compliment an artist can get, is when they reach the people who are thinking like they're thinking and want what they want. So I made these products that were super boutiquey, super nichey, really, really, in my opinion, high quality. And I put them out there, and it made a big splash. And then I put out, then the Prince thing happened, and I was very conflicted about whether or not people would think I was cashing in by putting out purple drums. But I thought, I'm not going to sell it. So if I'm not going to sell it, and I'm not copying any of his actual drum patterns, then it's a great way for. I was serious. I don't grieve when a person I don't know dies. I know other people do, but I got to know a person in order to really feel,
right,
to go through that when they pass. And with Prince, man, he was just such a huge part of my creative existence that I was a mess for like a month. And go Prince. So I said, you know what? I'm going to do this as a tribute piece. I'm not going to charge for it. And again, it got a lot of traction. People really liked it. And because of the SympleSound technique of making it so you open the project and boom, there you are in the middle of all this music. I did that. So that got the company a little bit more exposure. And then I decided to do FM. I have a bunch of other projects for SympleSound right now that I'm kind of holding off on releasing for two reasons. The first reason is that I really am busy with these other sound design projects that I'm doing for other companies, and it's nice to how often it's like Rev 2 comes up. It's like, well, I'm not going to get a chance to work on the Rev 2 again, so I guess SympleSound's got to wait. Yeah. And it's like, Core Gadget comes up. Well, I'm not going to this, they need it now, and simple and it's still rewarding work for me. But the other reason, the dirty elephant, filthy, dirty, evil elephant in the room is piracy. Mm-hmm. I started seeing them on torrents, and I'm currently in an awkward situation with an anti-piracy company that I had hired to do it. I'm not going to mention any names, but if people want to email me, I might be persuaded. But I had a bad experience because they'd misfiled all of my products and they had done all that. And it was like a transition in the company. And when that happened, all of a sudden my sales dropped off. Why? Piracy.
Yeah.
And it's just not cool, man. It's like I made my products $20. You know, it's like the cost of a couple of 6-packs, and far more rewarding and no hangover. So, so if you're going to make music and try to support an artist, go buy it. It's not like I get it when you're a company really who shall remain nameless releasing a giant suite of products that's $2,000. No, it's like unless you're Hans Zimmer, you can't afford it. But I'd really the whole point of SympleSound was to make the stuff super affordable and at least cover my own development expenses in terms of my time and effort. So I've got a bunch of stuff that's like 75% of the way done. I got some really, really legendary synths in the next Analog Collection Volume 2, like really legendary that you can't find anyplace. And I did a really good job with those, but I'm like, until I feel either I've got a slow period between clients, or I forgive all these people who shall, I don't know these people who are stealing my stuff, but it's a real disincentive to trying to do your own thing.
Yeah, I kind of want to say two things. For one of the things I love about what you're doing with SympleSound, and I think Purple Drums is a great example of it, is a very educational resource, and it's almost like you're like capturing the spirit of it. You're handing it off in a way. With Purple Drums, you've got that whole lesson file. It's pages long where you go through exactly how the sounds were made and some of the history behind it, where even if that was all it was, it'd be a great product. But nevertheless, you also put in the actual drums, so you can use them, which is great. And what you're saying about how you're trying to capture like these kind of like quintessential characteristics of these classic synths is really cool and important, because first of all, not many people can get their hands on a lot of these things for a number of reasons, whether they're broken or they're too expensive. That's a nice service in itself, that you're kind of capturing that in a digital way that we can, isn't so digital sounding, if you follow what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think it's a great service on its own, like that you're kind of, capturing that idea that what makes these things special.
And leaving the out of tune stuff that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah,
it's like if that 5-octave range isn't scaled purposely. I actually tried it once. I tried to go back in with the Ableton tuner and play with the detuning, and they instantly sounded wrong.
Yeah,
instantly sounded wrong. So I took it off.
It's part of what makes it what it is, and that's what you're trying to do. And I make my own sound packs too, and I've never really done it from that angle. I'm mostly, here's some cool sounds I made with my Prophet 6. It's not like I'm trying to necessarily get to that level that you're getting, which is cool, and I love that about it. But as far as the piracy goes, it is unfortunate, because your time is valuable and there's a lot of work you need to do, and for you, I for one understand what goes into this, at least on some degree, that it's such a time commitment, and some of it's very tedious and boring work. You're trimming your samples and you're trying to, you're testing them, and you find out like you made one sample C sharp when it should be D, and like everything's all messed up, and you don't realize it right away. But it's painstaking at certain points, and it's sad to think that something like that, like a piracy thing, would make it not worth your while to give this to the community.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're not shoplifting a candy bar at Walmart. You're
Right.
like literally, you're literally disrespecting a guy who's in his bedroom doing something he really loves and trying to make something for the world.
Yeah, it's taking the candy bar out of your hand, literally.
Yeah, exactly. And back to the sampling thing, I really, really love giving credit where credit is due. Our school has an internship program, and students who really shine in my sound design classes, every student has to do an internship. So the ones who really shine, they'll like hit me up and they'll be like, "Hey, I've got to do my internship this semester. Do you need anybody?" And there are two students that I really want to give a shout out to right now. Stephen Mashaka, who's got his own band project, and he hates me because I can't remember the name of it right now. But Stephen Mashaka is amazingly gifted at sample editing and knowing exactly how I like my samples edited. The other student, another real kid who shined, his name's Isaac Wesselo, and one of the projects is a massive collection of super high quality analog drum sounds you're not going to get. It's not like oh, here's the 808 and the 909 and the CR78. It's like I made amazing. I mean, I'm patting myself on the back because the stuff's really good. Collection of using my synths to make drum sounds.
Oh, nice.
And then I processed them beautifully. I put them into drum racks. I did all that. And when I was working with Isaac as my intern, he'd kick him back and he'd go, I think you forgot the tambourine on this one. And I'm like, so firing up the Prophet 08 and putting the tambourine in. But it was so nice to have somebody whose attention to detail was aligned with my own attention to detail and catching my stuff. I mean, that to me, he moved. Otherwise, Steven, I still hire. He has gone from an intern to a contractor. So when I need something done, he's already gone through the training process. He knows what I want, and I actually pay him to handle certain types of sample editing, and he's really good at it. Isaac moved. Otherwise, I would totally use him for other projects in the future too. Both of these kids, if you're looking for an entry level employee or somebody who doesn't need to be trained, go to my website and contact me, and I guarantee you they'll be happy that I give you their contact information. So
very cool.
Both of these kids are really good.
Well, and there it is too. There's another kind of unfortunate, maybe unthought of pitfall of the piracy thing. Is like, here are two up and coming people working, interning, busting their ass to make a little spot in this very difficult industry. It seems to be getting more and more challenging all the time. And, there's, if that's something that's not, like you or any company that is trying to work on something, do something new, there's just more opportunity lost. And I think these little things have big ripples in the long term, and I think we might, who knows, it could very well be like certain technologies that will never get invented, or certain plugins will never get made because it's just not worth what has to go into it.
There are companies that go out of business every few years. There'll be like a huge company goes out of business, and it'll be like, why did they go out of business? Yeah. Well, because you were stealing their stuff. People can't put a face on it. It's like
right.
Again, with the Walmart shoplifting thing, it's like, I think everybody's like, oh, Walmart's terrible. Let's steal a candy bar. But these are really, there are human beings involved here.
Well, I think even a lot of people that would, look, I did it for a while too. I had a moment of realization where I realized that, I was also doing a disservice to myself because I wasn't even making music. I was just trying to download things. It was, not proud of it, but I've been there myself. But I wouldn't have gone into a store and stolen a candy bar. I think that there's this thing that happens through our computer screens where we're disconnected from the world. Ironically, we're connecting to the world, but it's this anonymity, this, I didn't actually take it. It's just like these things downloading into my machine where it's easy to forget what you're actually doing. the actual act is stealing. It is theft.
Well, I mean, there is always all of that new ransomware showing up on the torrents that I had nothing to do with. That I think eventually people might, after they have a couple of bad experiences with viruses or whatever, from the torrents. I think, I hate to say that that's a hope of mine. I'm not hoping that anybody gets a virus, but at the same time, I think maybe eventually people will go, maybe we shouldn't go into that section of town.
I think it's maybe indicative of a larger issue we're having as we're becoming so, connected through the internet. I mean, you just watch the way people will talk to one another in their YouTube comments, how nasty people can be, that they would never be like that in real life.
No. Yeah, I'm definitely one of those. Say that to my face, mister. But and I certainly don't want to end this interview on a negative point, but yeah, I do think that people should, both in terms of their social interactions, and in terms of the way they go about business, their business and their music, with regards to software. I think people really need to realize that there's another person at the end of that. There's an actual human being at the end of that, line. And maybe they're going through stuff, Yes. I mean, if soapbox time. Could everyone just please understand that some people are going through rough stuff?
Yeah.
And your behavior and your social comments could be the thing that really, really, really puts them in a dark place. If you just look at it from that perspective, not the whole I'm not going to make a SympleSound product now, but more like let's talk about Facebook and, like you said, YouTube comments. Pardon my French, but don't say shitty stuff to people you don't know.
I can tell you a funny story, maybe to add a little humor to this.
Yeah, please do. Please do.
I got an email, and I get an email or a comment here and there, and I usually don't engage in it. I usually let it go. And I got this one.
Right.
It was an email, and it was detailed, and it ended with an insult I'd never heard before. Go F your dad. So it was this creative new insult. I was like, all right. So my initial response was oh yeah, you come over here and say that, I'll get you. You get offended and angry. But I've responded in a way wow, I've never been told these things before, and I'm really kind of upset that you're upset enough to send this email to me. And I just took that kind of approach. I don't know if I was necessarily apologetic, but I was I'm never meant to offend you, blah, blah, blah. It was really gracious, I thought. And I got an email back, and it was listen, man, I feel really bad. I didn't even know you were going to get this email, and I was going through some things. And it actually turned into a friendly interaction. But I think kind of what you said, we forget there's a person on the other end. And it's very easy to have your initial caveman reaction that you just want to, I'm going to break you for saying that. But it for me was an eye-opening experience that this was a person who was going through something, and they got a little ugly, and for whatever reason I became the target. And after an email or two back and forth, it was I actually do like some of the work you do, and it was pretty incredible to see how that situation was diffused.
I've had a couple of, certainly not that elaborate, but I've had a couple of similar interactions on Facebook back when I was on it more, and I do think that rather than getting angry, and God, we are not talking about music anymore. Rather than getting angry, I think there's a certain honesty and confidence in just saying, and I've done this more lately in my interactions with people just face to face, is just saying, wow, that really hurt my feelings. Did you want to hurt why did you want to hurt my feelings? And then that at least starts a dialogue. It's so much better than saying F you.
Right.
It's like, because really the reason you would say F you is because your feelings were hurt. So why not just fess up and say, man, you hurt my feelings just now. Why'd you want to do that? Was that your goal?
Oh, there's that human element comes into play instead of just gasoline on the fire.
Well, we are in stressful times, so that's for sure. Yeah,
it is. And maybe that's become an unhealthy outlet for some people, but I think it's like one of those oldest rules, or compassion, and often will diffuse those situations, and kindness is usually the way to go. I don't really know too many situations I've solved by, fighting back. Or, being angry or,
No.
So you're going to be at the Loop conference. Can you speak about your presentation? I know you're going to be doing about sound design with Peter Kern, who's another interesting person. I'm very excited to hear you guys riff off of each other.
I am going. Are you going to Loop?
I'm not going to Loop.
You gotta go.
Very upset, but no.
I went to Loop last year, and it absolutely blew my mind because it was like living inside a TED Talk, only on topics I was interested in.
Wow.
For 3 days. And this year, they asked me to do 3 presentations. So 2 are smaller. The first one is on sound design, and it's going to be in a small studio environment, I think with like 10 to 15 people. And that's on Friday early in the day, like around lunchtime, I think 12 in Berlin time. And then the next one is FM synthesis, and I'm going to be going, that's an hour and a half, and that's a larger group, I think 25, 30 people. And I'm going to be going deep into FM synthesis. And I'm going to be using a lot of the stuff that I use in my classes, because after years of teaching FM, I've learned a bunch of sort of thought processes. Actually, there's if you go to my Apple News channel, there's an article called FM Basics.
Yes, I've seen that.
If you don't, I'm a big fan of Apple News because it doesn't have any fake news in it. But if you don't have Apple News, if you're on an Android or a desktop, you can hit my blog, and if you scroll down, there's a piece called FM Basics. And I'm going to be sort of starting with that, where I demystify the core principles of FM. And then I'm just gonna get progressively more complicated. So that's going to be fun. And then the last one that you'd mentioned is going to be a dialogue between Peter Kern and myself on some of the things that we touched upon earlier in this podcast, on the art of listening, and how knowing what the knobs do is half the battle. And the other half of the battle, most people don't. Like, well, what's the other half of the battle? The other half of the battle is learning how to listen.
Yeah. So
that's that talk.
And go figure. You got to listen to your music.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize you had the other one on FM. I would love to sit in on that. Wish I was there. Because
the FM base. A lot of the stuff that I'm doing on my Apple News channel. And it's also on my if you go to my Facebook page and follow my Francis Preve Official, not my personal page, but the one that says Francis Preve Official, or my Twitter feed. I am constantly broadcasting tutorials because I write for Electronic Musician, and I wrote for Keyboard for almost 20 years. And I've become the tutorials guy for all of these publications because of the fact that I am a college professor, I am a sound designer, and I do love explaining stuff that's normally really complicated. Mm-hmm. I've got more FM stuff coming via all of those media, and I just love tutorials. But the FM thing is going to be really neat because a lot of people, because of what they see, the algorithms and the sine waves and all that, they get a little scared off, and they shouldn't, because FM can be really approachable if you sort of just adjust your camera angle on it and think of it in use some metaphors and analogies from the analog world.
Yeah, I've got my rudimentary understanding of it, and it's still, I'm always surprised, when I do things, but a lot of what I've learned from it are from some of the things you've written. I was looking at an article that I remember coming across about a year ago, the friendly sine wave.
Right.
Just really helpful stuff. So I would just have to imagine that'd be a great hour and a half of my life.
Well, thank you. Well, you know how to reach me. But
Yeah.
the other, and the other thing is, synthesizers can be really, really approachable, and I really love talking. I love talking about synths. I mean, that's why my entire career is talking about synths.
Right.
And I love sharing my knowledge. There are some producers and sound designers who are like, no, that's my secret. I'm not going to tell you. That's like saying I'm not going to teach you how to play guitar because you might you might steal my guitar playing. It's like there are a million different ways to play guitar.
Yeah.
So even if I teach you the concepts, you're going to sound like you, not me.
Right.
So.
Well, I, for one, certainly appreciate that philosophy of yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Brian.
I would love to pick this up sometime again if you are interested. Like I said, there's so many things I want to talk to you about, and I would love to even just pick your brain about synthesis sometime. Just
absolutely,
that would be a real treat for me. Absolutely,
and I'm totally down to do another podcast at some future date. I like the opportunity of being able to reach your audience, as well as the people who are already familiar with me. I love talking to you. You ask good questions. It's just an all around good vibe. So let's do it.
Well, thanks. I'm glad to hear that. I agree completely. So thanks so much. This has been a talk with Francis Preve. I guess, would you say the best place to get to you would be just francispreve.com?
Yeah. You can. Yeah, at the bottom of the page are the Facebook links, and there's the blog and the free downloads for the scapes and a link to SympleSound. And yeah, if you just go to francispreve.com, is FrancisPreve.com, you can kind of ricochet into any area of my career that you're interested in.
Nice. And I have a bunch of links I'm going to be posting with this actual podcast on my webpage. So for anyone that wants to see some of the things we've talked about, and maybe even some of the things I wish we would have had time to talk about, that'll be at the blog page for this, which will be afrodjmac.com/podcast. And but seriously, thanks so much. I really do appreciate this.
Again, it was my pleasure.
This has been a real great experience for me.
Awesome. All right. And to the fans out there, or the people who are just interested in what I had to say, I do have an Ask Me Anything button on my website. So, and I answer them as quickly as I can. So if you're patient, I promise I'll get back to you.
That's very cool. All right, great. So thanks again.
Thank you.
I do really appreciate it. It's great talking to you, man.
All right. Cheers.
All right. Have a great rest of the night.
Thanks.